Hello, everyone. This is the Facts on JW. Today I have a special guest. His name is Adam, and he comes from another high control religious group that you may not have heard of. It's called World Mission Society Church of God, or in other words, it's WMSCOG.
That's what we call it.
WMSCOG. Okay, cool. So, Adam, I'll let you take over and tell us your background. Tell us a little bit about WMSCOG, World Mission Society Church of God, and a little bit about what kind of religion this is and how you got involved in it. And then maybe you could tell us what led you to waking up.
Yeah, I'll just kind of introduce myself. So I was part of the WMSCOG, or World Mission Society Church of God, for 9.5 years, almost 10 years. And I was a unit leader, and a house church leader. I had the church in my house for a few years. So I was pretty active in it with the preaching. We would go door to door. We would go on campuses. We'd go to Walmart. We'd go to Target. We would go to really anywhere that had people, right? We would go and we would try and preach and hand out flyers, whatever the case is. And we'd also do a lot of community service projects. We would do blood drives, food drives, all these kind of things in order to save face, get the public aware of us and all of our good deeds. Like, hey, we're not a cult. Look at what we can do, So very active with it for, 9.5 years. And I'll explain what this organization is. So it was established in 1964 in South Korea by a man named An Sang-hong. He was born to Buddhist parents, and then he went, during World War II, he went to Japan as a refugee for about 9 years, came back, and then was baptized in the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1948. And then, being a Seventh-day Adventist, he started basically doing his own thing, started teaching basically his own teaching and spreading it. And so he got basically removed from the SDA church in 1962. And then a handful of people actually were removed with him, probably like 30 or something. And then he established his own church called the Church of God, JEHOVAH'S Witnesses in 1964. And then he started teaching. Most of his teaching was just about keeping the feast and the Sabbath. So very heavily, the WMSCOG is very heavily SDA. If you look at the SDA doctrine, you're familiar with that. It's the backbone of the WMSCOG is Seventh-day Adventists, basically.
You know what's funny about that? Jehovah's Witnesses also come from Seventh-day Adventists.
That's what I was researching. Like, everyone comes from the SDA. For whatever reason, so many cults come from the SDA, and also that all comes from the Millerite movement. So it's like one following after another and just keeps branching off. And that's something that you'll see with a bunch of these groups is they just keep branching off and branching off and branching off. So 1964, he establishes his church called the Church of God, JEHOVAH'S Witnesses. Their whole emphasis is just keeping the 7 feasts in 3 times and keeping the Sabbath. And that's basically their whole thing is that's what they do. And then around 1980, he starts writing more books, and we call them, like, the first book that we had was called The Mystery of God, the Spring of Water of Life. And he started writing some other books, like Explanation about the Trinity, the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil, and the Gospel. Our church material is what we came to know it as. So he started writing those about 1980, and then those all contain, like, his own teaching and his interpretation of this prophecy and that prophecy and explanations of whatever. These books are basically as equal authority as the Bible, because in this organization, they teach the Bible is sealed and only the root of David, second coming Christ, can come and reveal this lost truth, right? So he is the restored truth. He brought the restored truth. And this restored truth is basically his words, what he's teaching in these books. And so these books act as a key to open the Bible and unseal its secrets, essentially. So that's why, and this is going to come up later because this is very important in my story. Anyway, he wrote a prophecy that that the world was going to end in 1988, and also he started almost proclaiming himself as like second coming Jesus, and essentially 1988 was going to be the end, and he wrote a prophecy about himself ascending as Elijah in 1988 with the 144,000. 144,000 is also significant in this organization. They are the chosen, right? They are the pure, the select, the elect, whatever you want to call them. And so,
Jehovah's Witnesses too.
yeah. So then there's the great multitude, which are just kind of normal members, but the elect are the 144,000, right? Those are the special people that are going to have special grace and etc. Anyway, so he wrote that he was going to ascend in 1988 at the end of the world, when the basically destruction comes and the second coming Jesus comes, and he's going to ascend alive with 144,000. However, he died in 1985, so 2 failed prophecies. So wow. Double whammy. 1988 wasn't the end, and obviously he passed away, which is contrary to what he said was going to happen. And so when 1985 came around, that's when you see a split in this organization. You had one that was the NCPCOG that kind of held to Ansang Hong's teaching, and it's actually currently run by his son. So this church still exists today. It's called the New Covenant Passover Church of God. And then you have the WMSCOG, the WMSCOG, which was known at the time as the Witnesses of Ansang Hong Church of God. Then they rebranded in like 1997 to World Mission Society Church of God. So you have different branches. And also there was the Church of God, Jesus Witnesses, the original church that he started. That is also still active as of today. And depending on which organization you ask, they give you different dates for different things. So trying to figure out, okay, well, when did this break off and when did this happen and that happen? You ask any 3 of them, they all give you different dates and different stories. So good luck finding out what actually happened. But anyway, so there's 3 organizations to this day. And then recently this year, it broke off into 4. There's the Church of New Jerusalem, what is it? I don't even know. New Jerusalem Church of God, I think it is, which was started by a rogue pastor of the WMSCOG. So he started his own thing. And
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are these break-off branches allowed to talk to each other, or are you supposed to kind of keep your distance?
No, they're not. They have nothing to do with each other. They consider each one an apostate, and they're the original, and they were left with Ansang Hong stuff, and the others are lying, and they try and get dirt on each other. It's pretty childish, but cult's got a cult. So,
Right.
yeah, so 1988 came, and obviously nothing happened. Then the WMSCOG had a failed prophecy in 1999. They said the end was going to come. And then in 2012, they said the end was going to come. So that's kind of what established them as a doomsday cult. And then, of course, when that didn't happen, they're like, well, something was fulfilled spiritually, even though it was never talked about being a spiritual fulfillment. It was always this is the end, but there was a spiritual fulfillment instead to counter whatever, just excuses. And so the World Mission Society Church of God, now they claim 3.9 million members and 175 countries and 7,500 churches in those basically worldwide. But I would argue those numbers are highly, highly inflated, because that would put 500 members in each church, and I've never seen a church that's over 200 members. So do with those numbers what you will, but I think they're highly inflated.
Yeah. Just like Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't usually have not even 200 members. They used to probably have maybe 120 to 150, and I would say there's that meets, at one
that are regular.
Yeah, that are regular attendance. But now I would say the average is probably 50.
Yeah, and I would say, what if you're wondering what's the difference between all these different churches? The breaks, if you will, the different ones. Really, they all keep the Sabbath, which is you have to observe the Sabbath from basically, I was there from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every Saturday. They observe the feasts, right? So you have Passover, unleavened bread, Resurrection Day, Pentecost, trumpets, Day of Atonement, tabernacles. And so basically the feast and the Sabbath, that's what's similar. The only difference is who they worship, per se. So for instance, Church of God, Jesus Witnesses, they don't hold that Ansang Hong is second coming Christ. They hold him as just like he was a prophet, he was Elijah. But even they acknowledge that he had false prophecies. So the New Covenant Passover Church of God, which is still operating too, is run by Ansang Hong's son. And it's kind of similar. They just hold him as a prophet. He's special. He was God's chosen instrument to restore the truth or whatever the case is, but he's not God. He's not Jesus. But the World Society Church of God is where it takes a hard left, because the other two, they still worship Jesus. They just hold Ansang Hong as like a prophet. But the WMSCOG, after his death in 1985, that's when they started proclaiming him as second coming Jesus. And then they randomly declared that Heavenly Mother, her name is Zangil-ja in South Korea, is now God the Mother. And what's interesting is just before Ansang Hong passed, he actually wrote an entire book refuting God the Mother. But that's a whole other story for another time. And so it's really crazy how, these other, how they get so different. And, but essentially the one I was a part of was the World Society Church of God. And that is the biggest one, for sure. Definitely the biggest one out of the three. And that's their main teaching is, yes, they believe in the Trinity in a sense, but it's more of a modalistic version of Trinity, which, I guess isn't Trinity actually, but it's modalism.
Okay, yeah, modalism is where there's just one God, right? And there's only, he's like in three, I don't know. It's like one person up there.
Yeah, so the Trinitarian view is there's one God, but three persons.
Yeah.
But each one are God, essentially. But the three, so basically the Father is not the Son is not the Holy Spirit. There's three separate persons. Modalism is essentially, God picks up, essentially the Father, Son, Holy Spirit are one. Everything is just one. So that's, they coined the term modalism basically because there's different modes. So they believe that, and prime example is they believe Ansang Hong is the Father, is the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Right. And so that's how you get the modalism essentially. And so they think he is the Holy Spirit who came with a new name in Revelation. And they think he is the root of David that unsealed the scroll in Revelation 5. They think he is the angel that came from the east in Revelation 7. He's the Spirit in Revelation 22. And then the bride is Zangil-ja, who come and give us the water of life. But that's essentially how they think of Ansang Hong, and that's how they think of God the Mother. And they have all these different eisegetical prophecies that prove their point, just like every other organization, every other, pseudo-Christian cult,
Do they also think that he was Jesus on earth?
Yes, they think he is basically reincarnated Jesus. Yeah, he's second coming Jesus.
Oh.
He himself never said that, but after he died, it's pretty easy to speak for a dead person. And so they were, they made him into second coming Jesus, in my opinion, because nothing he wrote ever said that he was. But that's essentially a rough overview of the doctrinal side of the WMSCOG. But I would say as far as the tactics, it's very similar to the Jehovah's Witnesses, where it's like, don't look online, right? You can only read church-approved material. If somebody leaves, and especially if they're like a higher up and they know certain things, then we can't talk to them. We have to basically shun them. If somebody leaves and speaks out, they're a slanderer and they're demon possessed and they're just evil and they're like Demas and Judas, all this kind of stuff. And we don't do holidays in the WMSCOG. We can't do Christmas. We can't do any of those holidays. So actually this year is our second Christmas together. And me and my wife have been together for 10 years. And so this is our second Christmas together.
Did they celebrate birthdays?
Most of them don't, but I think what happened was they started getting compared to the Jehovah's Witnesses too much. And so they started being lenient on birthdays. At least, and the thing is too, is it depends on the local organization. Some were more lenient than others. Some were more strict than others.
Now, why don't they celebrate Christmas?
Because it's pagan.
Okay.
Because it's worshiping the sun god, and same with why they don't go to church on Sunday. They think it's sun god worship, and then if you go to church on Sunday and you worship Jesus, you're worshiping the sun god, and you just don't know it. It's a very much us versus them mentality. We're the only chosen people, and if you're outside of our sect, you are worldly, you are the whore Babylon. So all these other Christian denominations, all these other religions, they are the whore Babylon.
That's what Jehovah's Witnesses say too.
Yeah. When Ansang Hong, Father God, comes back to judge the world as Ansang Hong, all the false religions are going to be destroyed, and then he's going to usher in heaven, right? And the 144,000 are going to live with him forever, etc.
That sounds very similar to Jehovah's Witnesses, except that, they worship Jehovah, God, the Father.
Yeah.
Like an actual God, not a human, I guess.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to go to another church, right? Like I can't go from a WMSCOG church and then be like, oh, well, I'm going to go to, I'm going to go see what this church is about, or the Mormon church, or this other church is. That's like, no, like you become unclean, like you have spiritual issues, like we got to fix you. Like you're almost like cut off basically if you go to another church, because that's Babylon, Their churches are called Zion, so whenever you go to their organization, their building, they refer to that as Zion. And really, as far as an overall, I would say like their tactics is very similar to the Jehovah's Witnesses as far as shunning, isolating, right? You can't hang out with worldly people, right? Because you're going to have a bad influence. Unbelieving family can be idols. They can be used by Satan to take you from the truth.
They call it the truth too?
Yeah, they call it the truth. Like, we're the truth.
Jehovah's Witnesses say that as well.
Oh, really? You need you need to come to Zion to receive the spiritual food, the spiritual milk. Basically, that's the sermon. That's the words that you hear in the church.
Now, and you also said that you can't associate with people in the church outside of church, right?
Yeah, so you can only associate with members inside of the church, and you can't. So, for instance, if I just wanted to go to a movie with a buddy that's in the organization, and we just do it on our own, and we just go to a movie, and someone finds out about it, I would get in trouble.
What kind of trouble?
Basically, I would either get rebuked, or I would maybe be demoted, or I would have some sort of discipline, some sort of...
Do they do public shaming, like so-and-so has been removed or reproved or reprimanded?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, there's a story, one of my good friends, Corey, she was on the East Coast, so she was in, I think, New Windsor or something, somewhere over there. So I'm in Utah. I don't really know the cities out on the East Coast, but anyway, she was actually fat shamed by her pastor in front of the whole congregation.
Wow.
Like, this place is definitely nasty. Babies, they used to teach abortion. Now they kind of covered it up a bit. But abortion is still very much a thing where they would either influence it or, they would kind of hint at it. But as far as them actually teaching it and like saying to, they've dialed it back because they're a very reactive cult. So things that were considered, truth a long time ago, it's been forgotten. And if you bring it up, you're a slanderer. You're an evil person. You're not paying attention to God's word. You're going against God's organization or whatever the case is. But you bring it up when they actually taught it like years ago, like, hey, you taught this years ago. Oh, they're slandering. You're hurting the organization. You're bringing shame to God. It's like, you taught it, not me. Like, I didn't come up with it.
Jehovah's Witnesses, that is similar. They might say you're bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. And they have old light that they used to teach. Now they have new light. But this abortion thing is interesting. Do you have any idea why they would want people to have abortions?
Because it takes away from what a couple can do for them.
Oh, okay.
Right,
like Jehovah's Witnesses never taught that, but they would tell you not to have children. Because
that too.
Yeah, not to have kids because it takes away time from sacrificing the organization.
Yeah, that's very true in this organization as well. They would encourage you to not. I know that for a fact. Like, if you wanted to be a high leader in the church and really go far in the organization, it was a well-known fact that kids you're not supposed to have them if you want to go far with this organization. And I know of at least one leader who had a vasectomy, and he doesn't even have any kids. Like, it was just a precautionary measure, I would assume. I don't know if the church influenced him or told him straight up. I don't know, but I know he had one, and it's like, you don't have kids, so I can only assume that's part of why he did it. And so I know very well that most of the leaders, the pastors, missionaries, elders, whatever, because they're all different titles and they basically are the same thing, but it's more of just like oh, well, you're a deacon, oh, well, you're a mission. It's more just like I guess it's just what would you call it? Like it's a rat race of who can get the highest position, I guess, in that case. But anyway,
Yeah.
I know many of them don't have any kids
Yeah.
for that reason.
There's still plenty who have kids, but they try to encourage you not to. And then usually, like, if people who have higher positions usually don't have children.
Because they're very reactive. I'm assuming probably before it was very explicit, but now it's probably like rolled back a little bit, because every organization like this that gets caught and they get called out, they walk it back and they're like, oh no, we didn't really say that. You must have heard it wrong, or somebody shouldn't have said that to you. We're so sorry, or whatever the case is, but. And that's, gaslighting. They're very big on gaslighting. Oh, you didn't actually hear that. Or if you did, it was you heard it and understood it wrong, or that person shouldn't have taught you that. And that's like their go-to for everything. But essentially how I came into this organization is through my wife. So she was on college campus. There's a Salt Lake Community College here in Utah, and she was going to school. And sometimes they have just tables out and they're very active on campus and they train, they come up to you or you come up to their table and that you talk and whatever. So that's how she ended up going into the organization. Is she was found on college campus and they started studying with her, and she didn't know the Bible. And so naturally she's like, oh, I never heard this. Oh, wow. God, the mothers here on the earth. Wow. 144,000 will never die. They're the elect. They're this, they're that. Oh, the Pope is the Antichrist and the Catholic Church is Babylon, like all this kind of stuff. And, and eventually she started telling me, and I grew up LDS, so I didn't really know the Bible well either. And so when I went there, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, I've never seen this before. I've never heard this before, because obviously, I was in a different cult. So of course I'm not going to hear that before. And so after about a year, I ended up deciding to get baptized. So my wife was actually baptized before I met her. And she was in about a year before I was. And then so I got baptized 2015, and I was 19 and my wife was 18 when she got baptized. We're the same age, but she just came in a year earlier than I did. And then so that's what began our journey. And at first it wasn't like, hey, by the way, you have to do this laundry list of things in order to be saved. It's like little bit by little bit, like don't shine the light too much or you're going to blind them. So you got to shine them little bits at a time. You got to feed them little bits at a time. And so at first it's like, hey, keep Passover and you're good. But then after you keep the Passover, then it's like, okay, well now there's Sabbath day you have to do. Okay, now I kept Sabbath. Okay, now there's third day, which is Tuesday. It's Tuesday worship day. Oh, okay, now the feasts are coming up. Okay, so yeah, I got to keep the feast now. Well, there's also early morning I can't talk. There's early morning worship services, and there's 29 of them. So we have to go to the church and keep early morning worship 29 times a year. And so, there's a little bit of sleep deprivation going on there, obviously. And it's like, okay, now you kept all that. Well, now you have to tithe, right? Now we need at least 10% of your income. And on top of that, there's food offering, construction offering, special offering, all this different offering. You end up paying 30-40% in some cases of your income. And on top of that, well, you need to preach, because if you don't preach and you don't bear fruit, what happens to the branch that doesn't bear fruit? It gets thrown into the fire. And so now you got to preach in order to bear fruit, and bearing fruit is bringing people into the organization. And then it's a rat race, because obviously you want to be the elect, you want to be the chosen, and only those that are chosen, the 144,000, know that they're the elect, right?
Okay, what happens to everybody else that's not of this elect?
So if you're not part of the elect, you die, but you're going to be resurrected, and you're going to live in a heaven, like a paradise, but it's not going to be as good as the elect. The elect, 144,000, get like a special paradise. They're a special case. So everybody wants to be the 144,000, and so you want to do as much as you can to be the 144,000. I even remember when there was higher ups that would leave, like let's say a deacon or missionary, like someone with a title, I remember almost feeling relieved because I'm like, oh, it just became easier to be 144,000. There's a spot open, right? You know, but that's the
But
kind of mentality.
don't they ever like say, okay, we got 144,000, all positions are filled.
No.
Why not?
Well, because then you're not going to do anything anymore. If you were content, right? And that's something with these cults is you're never content. You're never sure of where you stand when it comes to salvation, right? Because there's always something else you didn't do, right? Oh, you kept all the feasts. Oh, well, did you preach as much as you could? Oh, did you pay as much as you could? Oh, did you look at something and you had weak faith and it made you have weak faith? Did you doubt sometime? Did you not hear a sermon all the way and pick up all the treasures, all the banquet of rich food that you could have eaten? Right? Like all these different things. So you're constantly just like, where am I? Where do I stand? Am I saved? Am I not? Some days I feel like I'm the elect. Sometimes I feel like I'm great multitude material. And it's this constant hamster wheel of just, and that's a works-based salvation. You never know where you stand. And that's the point. You know, only the 144,000 are the elect, and you want to be because you don't want to die. Only the 144,000 are going to be protected from the last disaster, Armageddon. But the great multitude, they're going to die, and nobody wants to be the great multitude. They want to be the elect. So it's like this internal rat race, even in and of itself. So not only you competing with the outside world, the Babylon, but now you're competing inwardly with each other. And so it's just a constant just go, 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 go.
Yeah. Sounds exhausting, but I know Jehovah's Witnesses have it's a lot of go, go, go as well.
Yeah. And you're always guessing. You never know if you're saved or not. You never know.
Yeah, no.
And
You never feel worthy.
Yeah, and on top of that, you're thinking Armageddon is coming any day, right?
Yep.
Look at the world. They're saying peace and safety. What does the Bible say? When they say peace and safety, destruction's going to come on you suddenly. And so when things are peaceful and nice, you're like, oh, is it going to happen? Oh, it might. Then when things are all crazy, oh, well, God said in the end times, right? There were wars, rumors of wars, it's going to be crazy when the end comes, right? So it's like, okay, but you're saying if it's peace and safety and everything's nice, the end's going to come. And then also when things are crazy and wars are happening and all these kind of things are happening, the end's going to come. So it's like, which one is it? But it's designed that way to be, you're constantly just, no matter what the situation is, you're always fearful that, today it's going to be the day. Today is going to be the day. Have I done enough? Have I preached enough? Did I bear enough fruit? Did I do this, that, and the other? And so it's just this vicious, constant, depressing, fearful, existence. And it's just, it never ends. It never ends.
Yeah, I understand. Very similar to Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. And
you believed in it 100% at one time.
100%. I remember lying awake, so many times just waiting for this Ansang Hong father character to come and destroy the world. I remember just waking up in night terrors and sweats, just being like, because if I heard like a loud noise or, there was something, I'm a creature of habit. So if anything breaks my habit, I kind of freak out a little bit. And so if there's anything out of the ordinary, like if I saw, like, let's say like I saw a plane flying in the sky and I wasn't familiar with it, I'm like, oh, is that him? In the dark or whatever, you're walking in the night and you see like a massive light in the sky. It's like, oh, is that him? No, it's just an airplane. Okay. Yeah. But you're constantly thinking about it because that's what they do. They put it in your mind all the time where this could be the end. This could be Armageddon, especially and they would always share different disasters with us constantly. There was never a shortage of, hey, there was a flood here. Hey, there was an earthquake here. Hey, there's a war here. Hey, there's a famine here. And they talk about it all the time. So you're constantly thinking about Armageddon. You're constantly thinking about doomsday. And so that's just, you're always just scared to death of, am I going to make it? Am I going to be worthy? Am I going to be, and so it's a terrible existence. But of course, like I said, they don't tell you that this is what's going to happen, right? In the beginning, they slowly spoon feed you. They slowly, shine the light because, and that's their excuse, right? Like if we shone all the light at once, you would not have received it. So that's why we had to show it to you a little bit, right? Because if you're in a dark for too long and somebody gives you a bright light, you're going to blind yourself and it's going to be terrible. So that's why we just do a little bit. It's dim and then it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. But no, that's just their excuse for brainwashing you. That's all it is. You know, and so, so I was an active person. I was constantly preaching. I didn't miss a single service for almost 9 years. And, when you go on vacation, you have to ask permission because they have to find you a local Zion because you can't miss a third day. You can't miss a Sabbath or a feast or anything. And so if you ever go on vacation, like, so if I want to go on vacation, but there was no Zion there, I would have to be like, well, if I miss a service, I'm going to go to hell. So I can't go on that vacation. Like, I've had to reject vacations because there was no church around there.
You're on a cruise.
You can't. I have never met anybody in the church that's went on a cruise that was a faithful member, because there was no personal worship for the longest time. And even still after COVID, because COVID, it was personal service, but even then, as soon as they could, they're like, nope, back in the building, as soon as they could, back in the building. And they play it like, oh, it's God's grace that we're back in the building together. Like, aren't you so happy to see brothers and sisters and this and that? Really trying to play it up like the return. But and then after that, it was, oh, well, we don't do personal worship anymore unless, the government is making us, like, because they had restrictions. Like, if you had these symptoms, like for the next couple of years after COVID, they had, if you have these symptoms, you have COVID. And so unless you had those symptoms, like, let's say you're traveling for work, you want to go on vacation, you had to find a Zion there. Otherwise, you would just miss the service. Because I even asked one time, I went to Florida and I really didn't want to get a rental car to go to Zion. I just asked the overseer, which is like my leader, like the local church leader. I was like, hey, can I just keep personal service? Because I don't want to buy a car because it costs like $1,000 to rent and then gas and everything. I was like, I don't want to buy a car. Can I just keep personal service just because we went to Disney World. I was like, can I just keep the personal service in the hotel, please? And they were like, no. Just because they can, right? Just because they can. So I went and got a freaking car just so I could drive to and from the Zion for the services.
But if you didn't go, I guess there were church members that didn't go every Saturday. And so they were made to think that they were going to, is it cease to exist or hell?
It's like hell, where you're like tormented with fire, and they'll show you. They're not afraid to show you, like during the sermons, they're not afraid to show you like pictures of people burning in hell. Even the kids would see pictures and videos of people burning in hell. So even from a young age, these kids are terrified of God. Like, I mean, I get it, you should fear God, but they hate like how scared they are of God, because they think God is just some crazy dictator that any wrong move, he's going to send you into hell. And that's how you feel. There is no peace there. There is no joy. It's all fake, because if you don't smile, that's a sin. You're going to go to hell. If if you're depressed, that's a sin. You're going to go to hell. Like, all these things, like, so you have to put on a bright smiling face all the time. Like, I remember when my dad died on a Friday and the next day was a Saturday. And I just to pretend like everything was fine.
What? They don't think you can grieve?
No, you can't show. You have to be happy. You have to be joyful always, constantly. You can't show any emotion other than joy and happiness, because you're going to bring dishonor on the church. You're going to bring dishonor on father and mother. You're going to bring dishonor on God. So I had to just put on just a facade, even though I was dead inside, just to, because I was in like a leadership position. And so I just had to pretend like everything was fine and everything was dandy. Like, no, yeah, everything's fine. Happy Sabbath. Let's study the Bible, or let's go preach, or whatever the case is. And I mean, of course I did my best to do that, but there were some times where I just went out into the car realistically and I was just like, I don't want to be here. Like, this is the last place I want to be right now.
It's normal to want to be there for 14 hours every Saturday.
Yeah, and so it was just ridiculous.
They do, like, if you do break some of the minor rules, like not going every Saturday, do you have to ask?
Oh, that's not a minor rule. That's like like you're sick. Like, we need to fix you.
So you have to ask for forgiveness, and then you can be back in God's graces again?
Well, it depends on what you mean. So, they do a very good job of instilling fear in you. And so a lot of times they don't have to really rebuke you unless it's something serious, like really serious. You hurt yourself a lot in that organization.
The fear drives people from committing sins.
Yeah, so
They would call sin.
yeah, so the fear itself, I mean, they do the people do it to themselves. Like they don't have to be rebuked for not keeping the Sabbath. Like they know because it's the fear of hell is instilled in you from a very early on stage. But one of the devious things they do is what I call mystical manipulation. So they have this letters to mother where you can go online and write letters to mother and you basically confess your sins. They really like repentance letters, like confessing your sins. But I've heard from sources that those letters don't go to mother specifically. The local overseer can have access to it. And so you write about these sins, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 weeks later, they have a sermon about that exact thing. And you're like, wow, amazing. God must be in this church. Like, wow, this must be the truth. Nope. Someone just broke the privacy agreement that you had, broke the trust that you had. And I wrote tons of repentance letters, so I'm sure they had tons of dirt on me, and they can expose all my sins that I've ever done because they were really big on, hey, you need to write repentance letters to this mother. But I mean, who knows? Maybe they could use it for blackmail. I don't know. And they have you download apps on your phone for like services and education and stuff like that. Like who knows what data they're taking, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, all that kind of stuff. So, and if you go on the property, I mean, there's cameras everywhere, and who knows, maybe there is microphones in the Bible study rooms. Like, I wouldn't put it past them. They've lied about far less things. You know, they tried to cover up far less things. And so, if any WMSCOG member is watching, I say this for your own good and for your own privacy. So maybe just be careful. That's all. That's all I want you to do is just be careful.
Do they have some sort of like, Jehovah's Witnesses have judicial committees where if you've committed a grave sin, they call it a grave sin, like a big sin, like say adultery or for fornication or something, or drugs. If you've committed a big sin, they have to interrogate you. Do y'all have anything like that?
No, because they have the letters to mother. Right. So they kind of
write a letter than have to talk to 3 men.
Yeah. And so essentially like, and sometimes they will, they'll either get found out or they'll confess to their overseer, which is kind of like, I guess, the elder in Jehovah's Witness terms. Yeah. And then they'll call mother in Korea and be like, hey, this happened, or email her, whatever the case is, depending on the situation. And then she will basically be whatever she says goes, because again, they believe that she is God, so whatever she says goes.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, and so going back to my story, so I was in for 9.5 years, and I'll kind of fast forward to well, I want to talk about this first. So when my dad passed away, I had to ask permission basically to go to his funeral because it was in an LDS church. And thankfully it was granted. But I do know for a fact that if it wasn't, I probably would not have gone because I was scared of missing the Sabbath. Right. My dad's birthday was about a week before he died. And it was on a Saturday, and the party was during the time where I was supposed to be at service. And so I opted out of keeping his birthday party because I was at church and I had to keep the service, because if you don't keep the service, right, that's a sin. You're going to go to hell. And they teach you like, hey, instead of being there for your family, right, you should just be at the church, serve more at the church, because God will take care of them, right? God will, take care of them, and they'll say thank you because you're serving God, and that comes first. And then let God bless them. That's kind of the mentality they have. So anyway, that's what I thought. And so I didn't go to his last birthday party because it was on a Saturday and I was at church. And then of course he passed a few days later. And so his last birthday on earth, I wasn't there because I was at the church keeping the service, worshiping a false father and a false mother. And so, then his funeral came, and I remember I had to ask permission to go to his funeral. Thankfully, it was granted, but I've heard of cases where it wasn't granted, and so they had to forego their own family's funeral. but thankfully I was able to go. The fact that a 20-year-old man has to ask permission to go to his dad's funeral is just a red flag in and of itself, just because it's in an LDS church. So anyway, I was granted permission to go, but I remember them saying, like, whatever they say, just ignore them or think over them, or just have like good, just think of our doctrine and what we say and how we would counter their argument. Like, so I didn't really grieve when I was there. I was just constantly like fighting Satan because I was hearing the words that everyone else was saying. So I was constantly just like, you're wrong because this, you're wrong because that, like, so it wasn't really, yeah. Anyway. So that should have been enough to wake me up, but weirdly enough, it wasn't. So fast forward a few years, until, we'll say January of 2024, we were in a house church, and honestly, our time there was very miserable, and like everybody hated being there. Everybody kind of hated each other, and it was just not a good environment. And so my wife was like, what are we missing? There's got to be something wrong here, because this shouldn't be how a church is, So she was seeing we were feeling it. We were feeling some really red flags because of the oppression, the micromanagement, the just sheer just disregard for the human experience. It was just so miserable. Anyway, so she went online, which is a no-no, but she went online with the intention, because they say, if you go online, you find anything bad, it's Satan, right? And Satan's going to kill you because you went online and ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or you heard an apostate, or whatever the case is. Anyway, so she went online to find An Sung Hong's original book, because she's like, well, maybe we're missing something in his book. Let's find the original and let's read it. And if you remember in the beginning of this, I said his books are a big deal, right? His book is like, I guess, the Watchtower production or publication, right? I would say even more so, because they consider him as God, not just God's organization, but he is literally God in the flesh. And she was looking at this book, and she realizes that in the original, there's 3 extra chapters. And so the book we had 35, and his original had 38. And so we're like, wait, what? How does that work? And so in my head, I was thinking, because we found it on the NCPCOG website, which is run by An Sung Hong's son, which made it worse, because it's like, wait, why does his son's book that An Sung Hong had have 3 extra chapters? That doesn't make any sense. And so I was going to bat for the WMSCOG. I was like, well, you know what? Probably his son added 3 chapters, because they're devious. We hate them. They're Satan. They deny An Sung Hong and mother and all that, the whole brainwashing kicked in, right? The thought stopping, the cognitive dissonance kicked in, right? But my wife is like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would they add chapters? Like, what purpose would they? I'm like, well, because they're evil, Until I asked my overseer, my missionary that was over us, and I asked him, I was like, hey, we just have some questions about these chapters. Looks like there's a discrepancy. One is showing 38, one's showing 35. What's the deal? And then he confirmed, oh yeah, we removed 3 chapters. And I was just like, I wish, like, we were both just like looking at each other like, what? How do you remove God's word? This is God we're talking about. How do you just remove 3 of his chapters? And the reasoning was, so I've heard a few reasons being out from other people, but the reason I received was, oh, mother didn't allow us these yet. And it's like, why? This is, because again, the root of David, the whole point of the root of David is to come unseal the scroll and to reveal the lost truth. And we say that this lost truth is contained in his book. So this is a big deal. This isn't just like some pastor's book. This is like salvation. God wrote, and we even sing in our hymnals, our new songs, what we call them. Like, he wrote, he saved money to write these books. He saved money for the ink. He worked and sacrificed so much, and this whole sob story of how he was able to produce these books. But then you're telling me you removed 3 chapters? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But at this time, I was cognitive dissonance, and I was like, oh, sure, yeah, because mother, she would never do anything shady. So sure, this is totally fine. I'm fine. My wife was on the other hand was like, I smell a rat, But me, I'm just like, yeah, brainwash me. I'm fine. I'm good. And so my wife was actually the one that started us down this rabbit hole. And keep in mind, I was fully just fine with all the dumb answers. I was fine going to bat for the WMSCOG. I was just, And then, it just started down a downward trajectory. And then my wife started, she started digging a little bit more, started looking at what you call apostate channels. We would call them slanderers, which is basically a truth or a fact that doesn't have the church's or organization's pre-approved narrative that comes before it. It's just an unfiltered truth and an inconvenient truth and an inconvenient fact. Anyway, so she was starting to listening to, there's a channel called Great Light Studios. There's a podcast called Playing in Traffic. These are and there was a website called The Examining the Worldman Society Church of God that has a bunch of information, a bunch of ex-member testimonials, etc. But I wasn't listening to it because I knew that was bad. I didn't want to be tempted by Satan. I didn't want to lose my soul. I didn't want to go to hell because of listening to this nonsense. But my wife was a little different, and she started seeing some red flags. And, she started seeing, like, for instance, one of the big ones too that we came across was back in the day when I was baptized and she was baptized, we were taught specifically that this Heavenly Mother, Zangilja, will never die. She's going to ascend alive with the 144,000 when Ansang Hong comes back to judge the world and destroy Babylon once and for all. And we were taught that, and we even sang that in our new song, in our hymnal books. We sang about it all the time, and it's very specific wording, like we will go hand in hand to heaven with our mother. That's very specific.
Yeah.
And so my wife was just kind of going through the new songs, and she realized that the wording was changed because about 3 years ago they had us turn in all of our new song books. We were never explained why, and this is something that cults do. They have you turn in old teachings or old whatever, and then there's no explanation as to why, no apology or anything saying, hey, we were wrong here or something like that. We just turned it in because we wouldn't get the new stuff if we didn't, right? And so we turned in our old stuff, and then we got our new hymnal books, and sure enough, the language on those songs, those very same songs, were changed to be more vague. Like, instead of going alive hand in hand with mother, it's like mother will be with us. It's not the same context, right? Because I know I know now what they were trying to do. They're trying to portray it like Jesus, where Jesus says, I will always be with you forever, right? And then they can pay it off like, well, did he say physically? No, spiritually. So mother's with us spiritually. Because that's what they're trying to build up to, right? They're trying to just bury the past and just pretend like it never happened. And my wife caught on to this, and she said, wow, the language has changed. They changed the new song books. I think they're trying to write out mother. I think they're trying. She's like 82 or something.
They're probably planning for her to, when she dies.
But when you're brainwashed and you're told this for, years upon years that she's never going to die, you don't even think about that, right? Yeah. Because you're like, she's never going to lie to me. She's God, Mm-hmm. And my wife started catching on to that, and she's like, I remember these songs, and I remember that it was very specific that this lady Zangilja is never going to die. We were taught that, we sung that, but why is it they changed the language here? And she brought it up to the overseer, and the overseer was like, oh no, we didn't change that. We didn't change it. We just, I don't remember even what the excuse was, but it wasn't a very good excuse, obviously, because I don't even remember what the excuse was. But, and she started just really seeing all these red flags, that being one of them, And so what she did was she's like, I want to get a real answer, because if I just ask the overseer, which is like the church leader, if I just ask him, he's going to give me an answer. But it's not going to be an official answer. It's going to be like, I think. And then if I come back and say, hey, you told me this, he can just deny it or whatever the case is. She wanted an official answer to this discrepancy of the new songs and 3 missing chapters and all this stuff that she's just been building up, this case to where it's like, this is just falling apart before my very eyes. But keep in mind, too, I'm just like, whatever excuse, I'm fine. My cognitive dissonance is so strong right now. I don't care. My wife is the one that's doing all this. And so she sends out a mass text to all the leaders in the local Zion, basically pointing out these things like the 3 missing chapters. They're preparing for mother to pass away, all these different, Armstrong. If you know of Herbert Armstrong, he actually was the first one to restore the feast and Passover and all that stuff, which is kind of their whole WMSCOG. That's their whole thing, is like, we're the only ones that keep the feast, the only one that keeps Passover. And then when you bring this up, they're like, well, he's wrong because reasons that don't make sense. Anyway, so she sent out a mass text message because her reason for doing this was because she wanted a official answer, and the only way she could get that is if it was blasted to all the leaders, because she wanted an official answer from like head office. And so I remember we got answers to all these, but it was shocking. It didn't really go into detail. It just kind of danced around a lot of it. And I remember specifically about the mother God issue. Basically, the premise was, well, we believe that mother's going to ascend alive with us. But even if she doesn't, does that change Sabbath? Does that change Passover? Does it change our gospel? No, it doesn't. And everyone's like, oh, man, oh, okay. But my wife's just like, there it is. That's exactly what they did with 1988. That's exactly what they did with 1999. That's exactly what they did with 2012. It's exactly what they've done with every failed prophecy. They just deny it, or they just change it, right? Like, because back in the day, if I would have said when we were baptized and this was a thing, if we would have said, well, what if mother doesn't die? Even if she doesn't die, what happened? Like, we would have been like, oh, we'd have been scolded and been, oh, you have weak faith. Don't you know who mother is? Don't you know who God is? Don't you believe the Bible? But now it's totally different. Oh, well, no one, and there was no even if back then. If I would have asked even if, it would have been your weak faith. You're denying God. Satan might be having a hold on you, or you're weak, or you're falling, whatever the stupid stuff they say is. And so that was the excuse for that. And we just saw everybody just, amen, amen. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, we're just denying what we sang about, what we've taught for years at this point, what we believed at this point. We're just throwing it out like that just because someone said so. And so essentially this is what started this whole thing. And I remember, because it was an anonymous text message. And so I remember the overseer was like, who sent this message? They're like, they're like Satan. They're an intentional murderer. Like, and it wasn't even a bad message. It was just asking these questions and just bringing up these points. Yes, it was anonymous, but it wasn't like, we weren't hating on anybody. We weren't calling anybody, like, my wife wasn't calling anybody out, wasn't saying anybody's name, it wasn't a bad message. It was just asking for clarification of these things. And yes, it was anonymous, but anyway, but he was just going off on it like, hey, whoever sent this is basically a bad person, is evil. And I'm like, that's my wife that you're just talking about. And then, and so it kind of started a lot of drama that way. And then eventually my wife ended up actually telling him that she sent the message. She went up and actually explained everything that happened, why she sent the message and stuff. And he was like, oh no, you're fine. It's okay. Like, what? It was like, so you have like this constant change of just, you called her Satan and she was trying to kill people, to like, oh, you're fine. You're okay. Like, no, we're not going to reprimand you. Whatever. You're fine. It's okay. You're not evil. So but again, that's a cult, right? Like, it's a reactive cult. They only care about what is happening right now. What is their image, their reputation? But essentially, kind of to make a long story short, because obviously, months are being crammed into this, but, and so eventually my wife just kept researching, and she just kept listening to, the other side of things. And she just kept seeing all these red flags where it's just like, it's not adding up anymore. The veil has been removed. They're making up stuff. They're changing, they're lying, they're gaslighting us, And so she ended up actually leaving the church with my kids. Before me.
Oh, okay. And is that a problem?
Super big problem.
Goes?
Oh, super big problem. Because we were both what we call unit leaders. So we were like in charge of other members. And so we were considered like good faith. And, they would say like the higher up you are, the farther it is to fall, And so, so when my wife left, it was a really big deal because I was trying to get her to come back. And keep in mind, during this whole thing, I was not enjoying it. I was depressed. I was just, out of my mind, out of depression, fear, anxiety, just loathing. I didn't want to be at the church, but at the same time, I didn't want to be home. I felt like I was trapped in this spiritual, emotional, and mental box where it's like it's painful on the inside and it's painful on the outside. There was nothing I could do that would get me out of this mess. Like I felt like I was a dead man walking. I felt like I was a damned soul that was just waiting for the inevitable. Like I had no hope. Like I don't know if you've ever felt that kind of feeling of hopelessness and anxiety and fear and depression.
Yeah.
But
Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of, they call it the fog, fear, obligation, guilt. They're the main things that you feel.
I mean, I felt like I was just running towards hell. Like, because that's what I thought. That's what I believed. I was like, well, and during this time, like I still kept going though, and I still kept doing everything because I was like, I don't know what else to do, right? Because I'm so afraid of leaving this God. I'm so afraid of leaving this organization, and because I knew what happened. I've heard what happened. I've seen what happened. You get shunned, and if you dare speak out, you get, demonized. You're called Judas. You're called this, and they tell stories about you and spread rumors about you and talk crap on you. And I did it too. I talked crap on people that left before, so I'm guilty of it too. And so I knew what was going to happen. And so I was a mess for months. I was a mess. It was all I could do just to be alive, And so when my wife left, that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done because, again, I was so scared of the organization. I was so scared of this God that I was worshiping and this truth that I was following that I ended up, leaving my kids and going back to the church, So I went and dropped them off and then went back to the church. And then my wife basically was like, I'm done. I mean, she kind of went back a couple of times for me, but it was mostly just for me. It wasn't for anything else. Like she could care less about going actually back to the church. And so I was going to the church solo for months, and it was extremely painful because all my life of faith, if you want to call it that, was with her. I mean, she brought me into it, she's the one that led me into it. And, we had 3 kids, and it was really it was the worst being at the church after that because my family was at home. So I was literally at the church all day, every Saturday, right? And for all the services and all that stuff. And my wife and my kids were just at home.
You had kids while you were in this organization.
Yeah. Wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it.
That was a kind of against the way it should be, right?
Yeah, I would say that if I wasn't having kids, I probably would have been higher up. I know if there's a WMSCOG member, they're probably like, no, you suck. You're the, whatever. I probably would have been higher up, but I think because I had kids, my availability and obviously my income was more my what do you call it?
You have other obligations.
Yeah, I had other obligations. That's exactly right. And so my full devotion wouldn't be towards the organization. So, naturally I could only do so much, which honestly I thank God for, because that's probably what allowed me to actually not get so far down the rabbit hole to where I couldn't come out. So I think it's a silver lining, to be honest with you. But anyway, so my wife left before I did, and that was painful going, months without her and without the kids. It was really excruciating. But then I just couldn't take it anymore. I was just like, because I've heard of different people and I've talked to different people that when their spouse leaves, they end up getting divorced, and then the one that stays in ends up getting remarried to somebody else, in the organization, and it happens all the time. And so I was terrified of that. I was like, there's no way I could do that. I couldn't do that, right? I love my wife too much. There's no way I could do that. I know any WMSCOG member watching this is like, oh, you loved your wife more than God. It's like, no, I didn't. Shut up. You're not worshiping a God. You're worshiping a psychotic old lady in Korea. Let's be real. Anyway, there's no way I would have said that back in the day. But anyway,
right.
There's no way. Anyway, so and it started getting to the point where, it was almost like it was either the church or my wife, but it was my internal struggle, because I felt like my wife was tearing me this way and the organization was tearing me this way because they wanted me to be more active even after she left, because obviously if she left, it's a burden to me, and it could be a bad influence on me,
Did they encourage you to divorce her?
No, thank goodness. They never, and I'm honest, right? I'm not here to tell a lie. I'm not here to defame somebody for no reason.
Yeah.
They never told me that. They never told me to abort my kids, thankfully. But I would say with my son, my third, I thought about it because, again, in this organization, it was common, and it was like, it was influence. Like, it's not very kid friendly. It's not designed to be kid friendly. And I remember thinking about, I remember when my wife told me that she was pregnant, I was like, what are we going to do with it? And now thinking about it as my son is 3.5, almost 4, just thinking about how I thought that, I'm just like, it really breaks my heart. Like, how could that even get in my head? But again, I wasn't thinking, this place will only you can only be a dad, a husband, a son, if this place allows it, because they have their hand in everything where you, really everything, especially the higher up you go, everything.
Nobody matters in those kinds of cults. That's what I always say with Jehovah's Witnesses. Nobody matters because the family doesn't matter. The children, the husband, the wife, the parents. It's all about the organization. And that's why the shunning and all that, if they shun their kids, they shun their brothers and sisters, their mothers and fathers. If that means one person gets shunned, or breaks a rule, then that means everyone else has to have nothing to do with them. So if you have, let's just say you have your whole family's in it, and you get shunned for whatever reason, they're not allowed to talk to you anymore, right? Whether it be your mother, father, your brothers or sisters. If you could be shunning your kids too, if they're adults and get shunned. Is that similar?
So I would say it's definitely not as extreme as Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay. I would say if you're friends, right? Like, I have been shunned by basically the whole church at this point, except for those approved to talk to me. And I think a lot of them try to talk to me to do damage control, or they try to do, anyway. But as far as like a lay member reaching out to me, it's basically forbidden, But if you have family
members that are in it.
Yeah, so if you have family members and you leave the organization, it depends really based off of how indoctrinated the member is. So I know people that their family completely cut them off and will not speak to them and will not talk to them because they're afraid of getting the ick. I also know other people that their family is still in the organization, but they still hang out, they still talk, it's weird and awkward and they're defensive, right? Because they don't want to catch the spiritual ick, but they're still at least talking, they're still at least having conversation, going to dinner together, whatever the case is. They're still family, if you understand. So it really depends on the person, how indoctrinated they are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah, but as far as like what the church says, and again, it changes because it changes based off the situation. I know for a fact that the whole church, my local church, was told not to talk to me, because I'm very outspoken, obviously, and, they're afraid of catching the ick. But if they had a sibling that left, it's a different story. So just case by case, I guess, if that makes sense.
So they call it the ick.
Yeah, like spiritual gangrene.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Okay. I was curious about that. Thank you for clarifying.
And so essentially to wrap this story up, so, my wife left and I was basically on a fence. I was playing the fence too long and I had to make a decision. And I remember just kind of going into the room and I was just like, okay, I have to figure this out. I can't keep playing the middleman. I can't keep sitting on the fence. I have to make a decision. Either I go full-fledged back into this organization, because at that point I was pretty what you'd say like stagnant faith, I guess, just kind of going through the motions, just trying to survive, etc. And so I remember I had to make a decision. So I went into my room and I was just like, okay, I have to, I can't do this anymore. I have to figure out what I want to do. And then I remember I was researching, and I just kept researching and finding out all these different things, like all this crazy stuff about the organization, the history and all. And after that, I was just like, it's too much, right? Like the amount of, evidence against this place, the amount of just the tactics, just the blatant lies and deception and manipulation and gaslighting and all this stuff. And I remember just thinking like all these things would pop up into my head that I used to say to people all the time. Like I used to say to other organizations, other denominations, like, hey, if your organization is 1% false or 99% true, 1% false, what is it still? Even though you have 1% truth, it's still false. Yeah, it's still a lie, Or if you had, a jug of water and you put a drop of poison in it, would you still drink it? It's just a drop, And then I remember...
We have similar analogies.
Yeah, and I remember just my words would come back to haunt me, where I'm clearly seeing more than a drop. I'm clearly seeing more than 1% false. But yet I still couldn't bring myself to leave. I still couldn't. I was in this mental block where I was just like, for some reason, I cannot just not go because of the Sabbath, because of these things that I thought were true, that I thought, even though like, yes, it's shady, even though, yes, this is like this history is messed up and all these kind of things. I remember I was like, well, okay, I need to take a break for a minute. And so I'm just not going to go, which was the hardest thing I've ever done. Missing a service, to me, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, because they're all about the appointed time. You have to come at the appointed time and worship and, do the whole bit. And I just remember missing my first service. I've never had that much anxiety in my life because I was like, oh, I'm a sitting duck. I'm a sinner. I'm going to hell. Freaking out. And it was kind of like that for a little bit after I left. But I still went back for Bible study because before I started leaving, I started actually looking at the verses that they were teaching, but I was starting to read around them. Not just the verse itself, but reading like the beginning and the end, reading it all the way through. Reading context. Yeah, and towards the end, I was like, this is not, like, they're saying one thing and saying this means this. But then I was reading the context, beginning and after, even the chapters before and after, and I was like, this is not what it's saying here. Like, these things are not adding up. And I just started getting more and more questions, like, about like Daniel's prophecy that we used to teach, about like world history, about Babylon the Great, the horror, and about the beast that comes up, all these different things, the beast, 666, all these kind of things. I just remember reading them in context. I'm like, what we say is the fulfillment doesn't make any sense if you actually read the whole thing. What we say is, this fulfillment is not it when you read this book, right? So they don't, I just remember seeing all these different things. And so when I stopped keeping services, I actually went back and I had this list of questions that I asked the overseer, the missionary, and because I wanted to be just 100% sure. I found all this stuff and I was like, it's enough, right? But I have to be 100% sure because I don't want to leave God. And so I remember asking questions in the Bible and basically stumping the overseer, the missionary. I was like, and this guy's been in the church for like almost 20 years, I think, and has his theological education from Korea. We call it theological education, but really it's theological indoctrination.
Yeah.
And he has like the certificate of himself in the back or whatever. It's like, anyway, it took years to do. Degree. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like basically a fake degree. And I'm like, you're this high up overseer missionary in the greatest church in the universe, the truth, and I'm stumping you with basic questions. And that to me was enough to be like, okay, I have all the evidence I have the history, I have evidences against the church, I have, all these different red flags that I'm seeing, and now I'm asking biblical questions and I'm making him stumble and he can't answer them. And that enough to me was like, okay, I can leave now and be at peace because this isn't the truth. And instead of answering the question, sometimes I would get gaslit, or he would be like, well, if you leave, what can your wife do? Your wife's not going to have any hope to be saved. Your family, And so at that point, I'm like, okay, yeah, they don't have anything. They're like the Wizard of Oz. You see all the smoke and mirrors and fire and all this stuff, and then you see the man behind the curtain. You're like, this guy? I'm worried about this. I'm scared of this guy. Are you kidding me?
That's funny.
And then my channel is called Finding the Alternative. And the reason why I named it that is because there's a saying in WMSCOG where they'll say, well, who else fulfilled this prophecy? Who else is this? Who else is that? Who else keeps this? Who else keeps that? Who else knows this secret knowledge and this secret knowledge, etc.? And people will say, well, if I leave WMSCOG and if I leave the Church of God, WMSCOG, where do I go? What's the alternative? What's the alternative God? What's the alternative truth? What's the alternative church? And so that's why I named my channel Finding the Alternative, because they know exactly what it means and the church is terrified of it because, and so that's what kind of led me on my journey is if you watch my videos from the beginning, like when I first posted all the way up until now, I'm literally taking everybody on my journey of deconstructing the things that I was taught. First is like the root of David, then it's like King David, then the new name and all these different things. So I'm researching as I'm going and just presenting my findings. And I'm literally, number one, giving the alternative. And number two, I'm helping you deconstruct by me deconstructing in real time by researching and showing you what I found. So that's essentially why I started doing what I'm doing, is to help people not have to go through that, to help people not feel hopeless, to help people not feel like they're alone in this, that there is no answer, that they left God and now all this waiting for them is hell. That's not the case. It's actually further from the case. You're closer to God than you've ever been, right? You're closer to the truth than you've ever been. But in order for you to come to the truth, you have to first divorce the lie. And that's the hardest part, is divorcing the lie, because if you can't consider what you know as truth to be potentially false or wrong, you're never going to find an alternative. You're never going to find it. You're never going to find the truth because you're so hung up on the lie. So you have to divorce the lie in order to marry the truth.
That's a good point. I like that. And your wife, did she struggle with this similar to you, as coming to terms with it?
She struggled emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Definitely not as much as me, though, because as soon as she saw the red flags and the lie, like the first lie, she was like, I was already,
She was done.
She was done. She was like, it just kept piling up after that. And then she was just like, yeah, I'm over this. God doesn't lie. God isn't a lie. So I was already done. But me, I had so much cognitive dissonance, and I was backing the church in the most crazy ways. Like, thinking back on the excuses that I would give, because she would ask me stuff and like she would gently kind of nudge me and ask me certain questions. And even my answers that I thought were super smart, and I was like, oh, here's the answer. Now I'm just like, oh, that was the dumbest thing anyone could have said. But in my mind, I was like, this makes perfect sense. It reminds me of the meme where the dog is like in a building and the building's on fire, and then he's just like, this is fine. That was literally me. My wife was like, get out, there's fire. And I'm like, no, this is fine. This is normal. It's all good. So yeah, she struggled a little bit, but not nearly as much as me. My cognitive dissonance, I feel like, was way stronger than hers. I even the lies didn't stop me. Even all this didn't stop me. It was actually the Bible that finally was the nail in the coffin for me. Was, if you claim to be the perfect truth and you can stand up to anything and everyone else is wrong, etc., you can't answer these basic questions without lying to me or gaslighting me or whatever. You can't use the scriptures. Yeah, I have nothing to worry about.
I noticed you mentioned they cherry pick scriptures. Jehovah's Witnesses do that too.
Yeah.
Where you take it out of context. Now, what translation of the Bible do they normally use?
So we usually use the NIV.
Okay. Jehovah's Witnesses have their own Bible.
I've heard about it. Is it like New World Translation or something?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
They just they've taken the Bible, but they changed some of the wording. Sometimes it's similar. Sometimes it means something totally different, or they're talking about someone else.
I think John 1 is pretty...
Oh, yeah.
It's like, instead of the word is God, it's the word was a God or something, and that creates a...
Yeah, it's a God. It's a God.
Oh, a God. That's right.
Word was a God. Hmm.
So
It's
it
a
kind of, that's
God.
weird.
And
Yeah.
also, like whenever, well, there's several, but one of them that I can remember is be like when John the Baptist was on Earth, and they were asking who he was. Are you a prophet? Are you Elijah? And he's like, no, no, no. I am just a voice in the wilderness calling out to make the path of the Lord straight. They say, make the way of Jehovah straight.
So
So
they
instead of talking about Jesus, they throw in Jehovah.
so they
So
changed Lord into Jehovah every time.
mhm. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Does anyone read Greek in Jehovah? Or I mean, does anyone read
Uh,
Greek in Jehovah's Witnesses?
um, I mean, there may have been some, but that know Greek. I don't know of anyone personally, or
Interesting.
the people who translated it didn't know enough.
Okay,
Didn't know
because
enough. They knew a little.
that's interesting because so I'm actually learning ancient Greek because that's one of the things that once I left, that was kind of a healing thing for me was like learning ancient Greek, like learning to read the actual ancient manuscripts basically. And I find it interesting that they put Jehovah in there when Jehovah is a Latin word that doesn't come until the 16th century.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's a
that's
made up
interesting.
name, actually.
Yeah, it's
The
the
actual name.
tetragrammaton that
Yeah,
yeah, it's not the original.
it's not, but the pronunciation is the incorrect, but but yeah, still that's what they would say. Well, the tetragrammaton, this is how you say it in English.
Because we actually don't even know how to say the original Hebrew, which is Yahweh. We just
Yeah, we
that's
think.
interesting.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So anyway, that's basically my story, and that's
Well, whenever you left that religion, and I guess did they make an announcement? So and so is now an apostate or
they're very
whatever.
secretive. Actually, all I hear is what people say after they leave, and thankfully, I've been able to help quite a few people leave the organization. And from what and they usually make up like petty things, like they'll say like, well, he loved the world more than he loved God, or he loved sin more than he loved God, or he loved his
Mm-hmm.
family or his wife more than he loved God, and or he moved, or just the most random things. Like I heard that I love my wife more than God, I love my family more than God. I moved to California, which I'm born and raised in Utah. I have no desire to go to California. Like just the dumbest stuff where it's just really that you couldn't even have made a good excuse. Like I mean,
And
like
they tell everybody that you're an apostate.
oh yeah, yeah. They're like yeah. He's against mother. He's against father. He's trying to destroy us. He's under the spell of Satan or whatever the nonsense is. It's like no,
Okay,
no, I'm
just making
not.
rumors.
Yeah,
Uh, and so then, whenever you and your wife left this religion, you just left. You didn't write a letter of disassociation. You just left.
just left.
Just left. Were you curious to be like, well, where do I go from here? What do I believe in now? What do I do? I need guidance.
Yeah, honestly, it was very it was hard because honestly, for a minute, I was just going to be an atheist because I was raised LDS, and then now this, and I was just like, you know what, screw it, I don't even care. like, I really don't care at this point. Um, but I just started reading the Bible, and I just kind of realized, like, um, I started reading Romans. I started reading basically the real gospel and just believing in Jesus. And there's a pastor. His name is JP. He wasn't a pastor at the time, but he was local to us. He was like in Clearfield, which is just pretty close to us. And it was interesting. So how the story of that goes is my wife was driving past this church, and this church has been here forever. We've driven past it for years because we've lived in Layton. I've lived in Layton my whole life. This is Layton, Utah,
Hmm.
and I've known this church for years and years. I've never gone there, but I've seen it and I know where it is. And one time my wife was driving past it and she saw a light in it and just somehow had a feeling to just go there one day. And so the next Sunday she went for Bible study, and so she went in there. No one knew who she was, but they just let her in there, and she was just studying the Bible. And they were talking about like heretical teachings or like heretical organizations.
Oh,
And one of the organizations that JP talked about was the World Mission Society Church of God. And she's like, no way.
wow.
And up until this point, he never brought up the World Mission Society Church of God. And
That's a sign.
yeah, and he had a few runs in with him because he was from Kentucky, and so he had a
Yeah.
couple run-ins with them there. But he's like, this was years ago, and I had no, you know, I had no idea they were even here in Utah. But it just so happened that my wife happened to go to the one Bible study room at the one Bible study class, and they happened to be talking about the WMSCOG. And so she's like, well, at this point, I need anything that's a sign, so we'll take it. And
Yeah.
so she started going. I wasn't so sold on it. I was like, too soon. I don't want to go. But she started going. I mean, I'm not going to stop her if she wants to, right? So she went there and she started going. And then she asked JP, if the same guy that she studied with, if he could, talk to me and answer some of my questions. And I was skeptical, as I don't trust anybody at this point. I'm like, I don't care. I don't trust
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
And so he actually met with me, and literally for months, like once or twice a week for hours, I would just ask him all these questions, and he'd actually show me through the Bible and just show me like what grace is, what Jesus actually did, like what we have to do, which is just believe in Jesus, and through his grace, through his sacrifice, we are made whole, made clean, and we are sanctified in him. And just through constant research and personal study and that, I came to realize, like, hey, we don't have all the answers, but we have enough, right? We have Jesus. And honestly, if you've ever heard of Pascal's wager,
I think I have, but I don't quite remember.
so
I've heard.
Pascal's wager, it's another thing. It's like Pascal's wager is basically like the benefits of believing in God far outweigh the costs, right? So like if you believe in God, you receive the kingdom of heaven, right? You believe in Jesus, you receive the kingdom of heaven, you receive his grace, his mercy. And the cost of following Jesus, you're not out anything, right? Unless you're in a cult, then you're out a lot.
Yeah.
But like I'm talking about like the true gospel, true Christianity, like Jesus
Right.
paid it all, Jesus did it all. That's the whole point. And so the cost of following God is not, it's not much, right? If anything, really, because Jesus paid it all. And then you become a better person. You have hope, you have joy, peace, etc. So that's basically Pascal's wager is, the cost of following, or the benefits of following God far outweigh the costs, whereas the costs of being an atheist far outweigh the benefits, if that's the case, if God is true. And so, I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's kind of the basic understanding. And so, yes, we don't have all the answers to everything, but at the end of the day, it's like believing in Jesus, that's enough. You don't need to know everything. And that was comforting to me too. It's just like, even if this life, let's say this life comes to an end, and let's say there is nothing after this, if I'm a Christian, I'm not out anything.
Oh,
I mean, if that is what it is, and let's say this is just a scam or whatever, which I don't believe so, but let's just say hypothetically, if at the end of this it's nothing, then I'm not out anything, right? I became a good person. I had faith. I had hope. I raised my family good. Not to say atheists can. I'm just saying, like, I just have hope. I have peace. I have joy, and I have hope for an eternal heaven, etc., and to see my family again, etc. All these things. But if it comes to nothing, I mean, I'm not out anything because there's nothing I can do about it. But if the opposite is true, and there is a salvation, there is heaven, and I, then I'm cool. I'm in.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my philosophy on it.
That's a good way to look at it. And I guess when you were first questioning, did you pray to ask for help, ask for answers?
Yeah. Yeah. Me and my wife used to pray. We didn't know how. We didn't know really
And like
who.
after you left the religion
Yeah.
and you were looking for answers, did you ask in prayer?
Yeah, we asked in prayer. My wife especially did. I would say she did more so than I. I was just like,
You were just done
I was just
for a
done
little
for a
while.
minute. I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't really, but she was praying a lot. She was looking a lot, and she was, she was definitely the one searching, and she felt like she got an answer, and we just went on. We just took it and ran with it. And now we're in a good church where, we love the people there, and we're happy there, and we feel at peace, and we feel that joy. And
You don't feel burdens with
No,
extremely long church meetings and door to door knocking and stuff.
not at all. No, I don't. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Keep
good.
Christmas again, and and all the
All the
holidays, and
holidays.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's our story.
Okay, well, that is a really interesting story. I see a lot of similarities with Jehovah's Witnesses and some differences. Uh, but I do think that most cults work similarly because most of them do shunnings.
Yeah.
Most of them have, it's a works-based faith. You have to work and work and work, and you never can do enough. And you usually do have a sense of guilt in those kinds of religions
Yeah.
or
It's
cults.
Yeah, it's like it's the same soup, just different flavors sometimes. Like
Yeah.
it's the same base, same everything. It's just, and the crazy thing is, WMSCOG, Jehovah's Witnesses, LDS, Shincheonji, all these other, Korean cults too, they use the same verses. They have a similar understanding, but they come to like radically wild different conclusions, but it's because it's all based off of their own select verses and how they put them in order and their own interpretation of the verses in order. And it's just, and they all say like, we're the only truth because who else teaches like us? Well,
Yeah.
you created the teaching, so naturally no one else can create something like that unless they're a Jehovah's Witness or unless they're LDS or unless they're WMSCOG. And they're like, well, we're the truth because the Bible says we're the truth. Well, who told you the Bible says that you're the truth? Well, the head people, the people that started the organization. Okay, so who created those prophecies that point to them being the sole truth? Well, they did. You don't see the irony. You don't see the circular reasoning there. Like the same with An Sung Hong. Well, An Sung Hong is the Christ. Well, how do you know he's not a false Christ? Because he revealed the prophecies. He taught us the prophecies about him. Okay, well, who said there were prophecies about him? Well, he did. That's your proof. Okay, sure. Go for it. Yeah. And it's the same with all these other organizations. I would assume Jehovah's Witnesses is the same thing. Like, our leader was, chosen by God. Well, why? How do we know? Well, the Bible says so. Well, how do you know the Bible says so? Well, he said so. He said that the Bible testifies about him. Like,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
what?
they actually have a verse in the Bible in Matthew that's the faithful and discreet slave, and they would say that that is speaking about um, the. So it's a group of men that are this faithful slave, and they call themselves the governing body now, but they're the ones who are like taking the lead in the organization and saying that they're getting messages from God to them, but they can get it wrong sometimes. They do say that we're just still imperfect men. We do err, but we don't need to apologize for that. We don't need to
Reminds me of the
apologize
LDS
for getting it wrong.
prophets. Like, it reminds me of the LDS prophets and the Quorum of the 12. Like, there's like 12 or 15 people, and they're basically like the end all be all of the LDS religion. And they say jump, and you say how high, and then you hit your head, and like we don't have to say sorry because God's will or something. Like, yeah, similar.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
whole
So
nother
before,
story.
right, right. Yeah, because you have a different, you have
Yeah,
a
out of the
background.
27 years of my 30-year existence, I've been in a cult. So if anyone thinks they've had, a rough go at things, I'm just getting
Yeah,
started.
that's true. Well, I'm glad you've gotten out of that controlling organization and you have found peace, and now you don't have to feel fear and guilt that and obligations, and it's a terrible feeling to always feel fear of, well, I'm going to go to hell because I didn't do XYZ,
Yeah.
or guilt. And I don't know, also just curious, but in the organization you were in, did people feel, and I have to say this for YouTube, unaliving themselves?
I have heard of people attempting to. I have heard of people that have. Um,
Mm.
and it's a real thing. Like, this organization is not good for your mental health. Like, the shunning, the leaving, that fear.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really good at hiding things too. And so from what I know, like the count of such is a lot higher than I even know.
Wow.
And that's another thing why I want to speak out and do this is because number one, I don't want people to feel like they're alone, that they have to go through that fear. And I mean, I'm punching the WMSCOG in the mouth saying, you're nothing, And so I wanted to be that voice to where people can rally behind it and, basically not have to go through that fear, not feel alone. But, also too, I feel like it's protecting people's lives, it's giving their time back to them. And if I can help somebody be in a day as opposed to a year, or a year as opposed to 10 years, I mean, think of how many weddings, graduations, births, deaths, or all these different things that they're missing just because of they're serving this crap organization. Like, there's just so much stuff at stake that it's hard to just be like, no, they'll figure it out. I'm sure they'll be all right. It's like, who knows? Maybe they won't be. If I can do something to help, then why not?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I thank you so much for your coming on and sharing your story. I will say Jehovah's Witnesses also do have they actually have a pretty high unaliving themselves issues and feelings of it too.
Oh, I felt it. I know tons of people that have felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt it too. So, but yeah, so we can see how a lot of similarities there.
Yeah.
We got to help people get out of those controlling groups for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, we'll be in touch. And yeah, if any WMSCOG member or even any Jehovah's Witness members are watching this, like, just know it's, you're not alone. There's people that have gone through the same thing you've gone through. There's people that you can rally behind, that you can ask questions, that you can confide in, that aren't out to get you. They're not out to snitch on you. They're not out to report on you. They're just out to genuinely help you and genuinely help you figure stuff out. And just know that you're not alone. You're not the only one that feels this way. You're not the only one that's going through this. Even across other organizations, not even just Jehovah's Witnesses or WMSCOG or Mormons, the list is endless of high control groups. That's where there is no shortage of that. So the last thing I just want to say is just know that there are people who want to help, that can give you guidance, that can let you know it's going to be okay. What you're feeling now is not the end. There is a bright future. It's just painful now, but there is a bright future. You just kind of have to wait for it and work at it, but it will come.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'll make sure that your YouTube channel will be in the description.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on today and sharing your story. I know many of us can relate to what it's like to be in a high control religious group. So remember, everyone, always use your critical thinking skills when making decisions, and stay tuned for more interviews. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share, and we will see you again soon.